In this mini lecture we will discuss new renewable energy alternatives to fossil fuels. Specifically we will discuss solar power, wind power, geothermal energy, wave and tidal energy and hydrogen fuel cells. After reading Chapter 21, watching this video or reading the transcripts that go with this video, and watching the other assigned videos and activities for this chapter, you should be able to outline the major sources of renewable energy, summarize their benefits, and assess their potential growth, describe solar energy and the ways it is harnessed, and evaluate its advantages and disadvantages, describe wind power and how we harness it, and evaluate its benefits and drawbacks, describe geothermal energy and the ways we make use of it, and assess its advantages and disadvantages, describe ocean energy sources and how we can harness them, explain hydrogen fuel cells and weigh options for energy storage and transportation. As was mentioned in the mini-lecture on conventional energy alternatives, there are many reasons to replace fossil fuels with renewable energy alternatives. However, we can't switch to renewables overnight. There are still some technology and economic barriers to some renewable energy sources. The greatest hurdle, however, is politics. Conventional sources of energy, such as oil and gas, receive more government subsidies and tax breaks than renewable energy alternatives. Specifically, the oil and gas industry receives 75 times more subsidies than new renewable energy sources. Nuclear energy receives 31 times more subsidies than new renewable energy sources. This isn't all that surprising considering oil, gas and nuclear have been the main sources of energy in our nation for many decades. However, these policies of supporting non-renewable energy sources, while shortchanging renewable sources, keep fossil fuels cheap and inhibits development of renewable energy sources. We will begin our examination of new renewable energy alternatives by first looking at solar energy. Solar energy is quite simply the energy from the sun. Here are some interesting statistics regarding solar energy. Each day the Earth receives enough solar energy to power human consumption for a quarter of a century. Each square meter of Earth receives 17 times the energy of a light bulb, and typical homes have enough roof area to meet all their power needs with rooftop solar energy panels. The reason we have yet to take advantage of this renewable energy source fully is because we lack effective and cost-efficient technology to capture and use the sun's energy. There are two ways by which we collect solar energy: passive solar energy collection and active solar energy collection. Passive solar energy is when buildings are designed to maximize absorption of sunlight in winter and minimize absorption of sunlight in the summer so as to keep the home cool. Homes and buildings designed for passive solar energy collection usually have low, south-facing windows that capture the energy from the winter sun. These buildings also have overhangs on windows block summer light. Buildings which utilize passive solar techniques also use thermal mass, which are materials that absorb, store, and release heat in floors, roofs, and walls. Concrete, straw, and brick are good examples of thermal mass. Homes with passive solar energy techniques incorporated into them also usually have landscaping specifically designed to provide shade and wind protection as an additional means of regulating the temperature naturally. A key thing to keep in mind with passive solar is that it does not use any device or system to collect, focus, store, or transmit solar energy. Passive solar energy is not a new concept by any means. Some ancient Native Americans were known as cliff dwellers because they built elaborate and sophisticated villages in the side of cliffs. These ancient dwellings were designed to minimize the heat that comes in during the summer from the sun, while maximizing the heat that is absorbed during the winter. In contrast to passive solar energy collection, active solar energy collection uses technology to focus, move, or store solar energy. The most common technology used in active solar energy collection is a flat-plate solar collector. Flat-plate solar collectors are dark-colored, heat-absorbing metal plates mounted on rooftops. Water, air, or antifreeze runs through the collectors, transferring heat throughout the building. Heated water is stored and used later or can be passed through pipes to heat the building. Over 200 million households or businesses worldwide heat water with solar collectors, but only 1.5 million US of these are in the US. Most of the US sites are outdoor swimming pools. Another active solar collection system is a photovoltaic cell or PV cell. PV cells convert sunlight directly into electrical energy. Small PV cells are in watches and calculators, however PV cells can also be arranged in modules on roofs. There are some variations of PV technology, most notable are thin-film solar cells. These are photovoltaic materials compressed into thin sheets. These cells are lighter, less bulky, and cheaper, but are far less efficient. Thin-film solar cells can be incorporated into roofing shingles, roads, and other surfaces such as highways. Technology is continually advancing, so many people view thin-film solar cells as a promising technology for the future. Another benefit of capturing your own energy is that in some places producers of PV electricity can sell their power to a utility company. In parts of 46 U.S. states, homeowners can sell the power they'll harness through renewable to the utility company. This process is called net metering and means that the value of the power the consumer provides is subtracted from their monthly utility bill. A similar system is called feed-in tariffs and is when utility companies pay individual producers of power more than the market price of power, so power producers turn a profit on their solar panels or other technology they use to collect energy. Germany is the leader in the idea of feed-in tariffs. In stark contrast to Germany's policy of feed-in tariffs, the state of Oklahoma passed a bill in April of 2014 that would charge Oklahoma residents an additional fee if they produce their own energy through solar panel or wind turbines on their property. I've provided you a link to an article that describes this law in the transcript and an eCampus if you're interested in reading more about this policy. Another way we harness the sun's energy is through concentrated solar power, or CSP. CSP utilizes technologies to concentrate solar energy to generate electricity. There are a variety of ways this can be done, but essentially mirrors concentrate solar power to a central point. At solar power plants that use CSP, mirrors concentrate the solar power to a tall power tower, as can be seen in the top left-hand photo. At CSP plants, mirrors swivel to track sun's movement. The power towers then heat air or fluids to run a steam-driven generator. Smaller versions of this can be used to cook food, as can be seen in the top right-hand photo and bottom photo. You can make your own solar oven for camping or emergency situations. If you're interested in this, I've provided a link in eCampus. However, a Google search for DIY solar oven will yield many other websites with similar information. While there are many benefits of solar power, we must weigh these against the downsides as well. The advantages of solar power are that it's an inexhaustible energy source. Solar technologies use no fuels, are quiet, are safe, contain no moving parts, and require little maintenance. Solar panels allow local, decentralized control over energy, enabling people to live off the grid, and in some cases people can take advantage of net metering or feed-in tariffs. Solar energy can be especially helpful in developing nations. In homes of individuals in developing countries, their energy demands are often small enough that a simple solar panel supplies all the power they need. For example, some Indian villages have homes that are entirely powered off of simple solar panels, which local women are trained to build and maintain. I've provided a link to a story featuring a model village in India that achieved this feat. Another benefit is that green-collar jobs are being created as this industry grows, and finally, solar panels do not emit greenhouse gases and air pollution when up and running. There are three main disadvantages of solar panels. Disadvantages: 1. Solar radiation varies geographically, and some areas are just not sunny enough to make solar panels worthwhile. 2. Solar power is intermittent. Daily and seasonal variation also poses problems. To overcome the problem of solar power being intermittent, we need to store and backup power, and current batteries may not be sufficient to supply the energy needs when the sun is not available. 3. Finally, there are technology limitations. Currently, solar power is the most expensive source of electricity, but prices have dropped and efficiency has increased. The technology limitations can be attributed to lack of investment. On the bright side though, solar energy has grown by 30% worldwide annually the past 40 years. Furthermore, solar energy use could increase as prices fall due to improving technology and if governments provided incentives like Germany's feed-in tariff system. Moving on, the second type of new renewable energy. Wind energy. Wind energy is energy derived from movement of air. Wind turbines are used to harness wind energy. Wind turbines are devices that convert wind's kinetic energy into electric energy. You may have seen a field of wind turbines before. There are several in West Texas. These fields are referred to as wind farms and may contain hundreds of turbines. Wind is the fastest growing energy sector. 5 nations produce 75% of the world's wind power. In order, these nations are China, the US, Germany, Spain, and India. While these are the leading countries producing wind power, there are dozens of other nations that have started harnessing the power of wind. Although China produces the most wind power, Denmark actually is the leading nation in the proportion of electricity generated from wind. In the US, Texas generates the most wind power of all the states. Wind research experts released a report in 2008 that outlined how the U.S. could meet 20% of the electrical needs of the entire U.S. by 2030 using wind alone. More and more wind farms are being developed offshore because wind speeds are 20% greater over open water than they are over land. While the costs to erect and maintain turbines in water are higher compared to land, the offshore wind farms produce more power and are therefore more profitable. Currently, there are no offshore wind farms in the U.S., however, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA, one is in the works for off the coast of Rhode Island. As of July 2015, the foundation was in place and the plans are to install 5 turbines for a total of 30 megawatts of power generation capacity. According to the EIA, the wind farm will be online in 2016. U.S. Another wind farm is planned for construction off the coast of Cape Cod in Massachusetts. The wind farm in Cape Cod would include 130 wind turbines for a total capacity of 468 megawatts. As with all things, wind power has its advantages and disadvantages. To begin with the advantages. Wind produces no emissions once installed and prevents emissions. It is more efficient than conventional power sources. The ROI of wind is about ROI 23:1. Compared to oil, which is about 11:1, wind is more efficient. Turbines use less water than conventional power plants. Local areas can become more self-sufficient. Farmers and ranchers can produce extra revenue for themselves by lease their land to a wind farm. The farmers can continue to use their land for other purposes because wind turbines take up a relatively small footprint and the land around the turbines remains unaffected. Technology is also reducing the cost of wind farm construction, and wind power creates jobs. 85,000 people now work in the wind industry in the U.S. Globally, there are 700,000 employed by this industry. The downsides of wind energy are: 1. That wind varies from time to time and place to place. In the U.S. the coast, mountainous regions, and Tornado Alley, i.e. Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota and North Dakota are the places with the highest average wind speeds. 0. Wind sources are not always near population centers that need energy, so transmission networks need to be expanded. 0. Some local residents often oppose them for aesthetic reasons. The common phrase you'll hear in this regard is NIMBY, which stands for not in my backyard. 0. Finally, there is some concern that the turbines threaten birds and bats, which are killed when they fly into rotating blades. There is, however, uncertainty regarding the severity of bird and bat deaths caused by wind turbines. Some research suggests that other man-made threats such as glass windows pose a great risk to birds and bats. The solution to this problem could be to build turbines away from migratory flyways and critical habitat. The third new renewable energy we will examine is geothermal energy. Geothermal energy is thermal energy from beneath Earth's surface. This type of energy is generated from the radioactive decay of elements under high pressures deep inside the planet. The heat rises to the surface of the Earth through magma, fissures, and cracks. When this energy heats groundwater, The water may erupt at the surface as geysers or submarine hydrothermal vents. Geothermal energy can be used to heat water, which in turn can be used to heat buildings. Geothermal is actually very efficient because it is using natural means to heat water. Geothermal energy can be used to heat homes, buildings, or greenhouses, to drive industrial processes, to dry crops, or to generate electricity through the use of a geothermal power plant. 90% of Iceland is heated through direct heating with piped hot water warmed through geothermal energy. As you can see from the map in the upper right-hand corner of this slide, heated groundwater is geographically determined. The U.S. is the leader in geothermal power. The largest geothermal power plants are the geysers in California, which provide electricity for 750,000 homes. Globally, 1/3 of the geothermal energy we use is for electricity and 2/3 is for direct heating. Although heated groundwater is available only in certain geographic regions, we can take advantage of natural temperature differences between the soil and air anywhere through the use of ground source heat pumps, or GSHPs. GSHPs take advantage of the fact that soil temperatures vary less than air temperatures. In winter, heat is transferred from the ground to the building through the use of a GSHP. In summer, heat is transferred from the building to the ground. Compared to conventional electric heating and cooling, GSHP are 50 to 70% more efficient at heating spaces, and they're 25 to 40% more efficient at cooling spaces. GSHP can cut electricity use by 25–60% and can reduce emissions by up to 70%. The advantages of geothermal energy are that it reduces emissions, and that it can be sustainable if the groundwater is not withdrawn faster than it can be recharged. The disadvantages of geothermal energy are that patterns of geothermal activity in the crust shift, meaning geothermal hotspots may change. It is limited to areas where the energy can be tapped, and dissolved salts and minerals corrode equipment. One method being developed to overcome the geographic limitation of geothermal energy is enhanced geothermal systems, or EGS. With EGS, engineers drill deep into rock to fracture the rock and pump in cold water. When the water is heated, it is withdrawn to generate electricity. In theory, EGS could be used in many locations. However, EGS also appears to trigger minor earthquakes, so for now our use of geothermal power will stay localized to areas where geothermal energy is naturally occurring. The next new renewable energy alternative we will consider is energy we can harness from the ocean. There are 4 different approaches to obtain energy from the ocean. 3 of the 4 approaches involve ocean movement. The idea behind the approaches that involved ocean movement to capture the kinetic energy from the natural motion of ocean water to generate electrical power. The other approach that involves the ocean, but not its movement, is based off of temperature. The first developing technology aimed at harnessing energy from the ocean we will consider is wave energy. Wave energy is energy harnessed from the motion of ocean waves. Many designs for machinery to harness wave energy have been developed, however few of these designs have been adequately tested. 2 designs are shown in this slide. In the image in the top right you see an offshore snake-like wave energy converter. Machinery and hydraulic fluids inside the converter use wave motion to generate electricity, which is then transmitted to shore using undersea cables. The image in the lower portion of the slide shows a coastal onshore facility. This facility captures the energy from waves coming to shore by funneling the waves into a narrow chamber. The rise and fall of the water level inside the chamber compresses and decompresses air. This causes air to flow through the chamber. The airflow drives a turbine on the outside of the chamber to generate electricity. Currently there are no commercially operating wave energy facilities, either offshore or onshore. There are only demonstration and research projects at the moment. The second approach to harnessing energy from the ocean's motion is to capture tidal energy by building a dam across the outlet of a tidal basin. Differences in height between low and high tide are greatest in long narrow bays. The incoming tide flows through the sluice gates. The sluice gate is closed and the tide recedes, causing there to be a difference in the water level on either side of the barrage. When the sluice gate is opened again, the outgoing water leaves the basin and in the process turns the turbine to generate electricity. In short, tidal currents turn turbines to generate electricity. The largest tidal station is in South Korea and is the station shown in this slide. There is also a 50-year-old tidal station in France, which is just slightly smaller than the one in South Korea. Small stations operate in Canada, China, Russia, the US and the United Kingdom. A third way to harness marine kinetic energy is to capture the motion of ocean currents, such as the Gulf Stream. Devices that look like underwater windmills have been erected in European waters to test this idea. This approach is so new and novel that it is difficult to find anything other than artist renditions of the underwater turbines. Such an image is seen in the upper portion of this slide. Needless to say, tapping into ocean current energy is going to require a great deal more research and development before it is ready for commercial power generation. The final approach we will consider for harnessing energy from the ocean is ocean thermal energy conversion, or OTEC. This approach uses the temperature difference between the surface of ocean water and deep ocean water. To grasp the potential scale of OTEC, consider that each day tropical oceans absorb solar radiation equal to the heat content of 250 billion barrels of oil. There are two approaches to OTEC. The first is a closed-cycle approach which pipes warm water into a facility to evaporate chemicals, such as ammonia, that boil at low temperatures. The evaporated gases then spin turbines to generate electricity. Alternatively, an open-cycle approach pipes and warms surface water into a vacuum. The steam from the warm water is then used to spin turbines for energy. The added benefit of this approach is that the water that evaporates can be recovered, condenses and sold as desalinated fresh water for drinking or agriculture. As with all the ocean energy approaches except tidal energy, OTEC is still in development because costs are still too high to create a commercial facility. The next new renewable energy alternative we will consider is hydrogen fuel. Hydrogen is the world's simplest and most abundant element. What you should understand about hydrogen is that it is an energy carrier, not a primary energy source. Hydrogen fuel cells have the potential to store large amounts of energy cleanly, conveniently, and efficiently. The energy that is carried by hydrogen fuel cells can then be converted and used as an energy source later times and in different places. The tricky part about hydrogen as a fuel source, though, is that hydrogen gas does not tend to exist freely on Earth. Rather, hydrogen atoms bind to other molecules. Energy therefore is needed to force molecules to release the hydrogen. Scientists are studying several ways to produce hydrogen. One of the most common methods for releasing hydrogen from bonds is electrolysis. In electrolysis, electricity is used to separate hydrogen from water molecules. You can see the equation for electrolysis in this slide. Specifically, two water molecules split through electrolysis yield two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. The image in this slide illustrates the process of electrolysis. Hydrogen production's impact depends on two things. 1. The source of electricity used in electrolysis, and 2. The hydrogen source. If electricity produced from renewable sources, such as solar or wind, then the hydrogen produced would be very clean. Whereas if the electricity used for electrolysis is from a fossil fuel, this will create greenhouse gases and further deplete our low stocks of these limited fuels. In this slide you can see the chemical equation for using methane to split hydrogen from water. The products of this reaction are 4 hydrogen molecules and 1 carbon dioxide molecule. In order for electrolysis and hydrogen fuel cells to be sustainable, we must find ways of splitting hydrogen without using fossil fuels. Once isolated, the hydrogen fuel can drive electricity generation in a hydrogen fuel cell. The chemical reaction to generate electricity in a fuel cell is simply the reverse of electrolysis. An oxygen molecule and 2 hydrogen molecules bind to form 2 water molecules. When this process takes place in a fuel cell, it generates electricity. In this slide you see a diagram of a hydrogen fuel cell. In a fuel cell, atoms of hydrogen are split into protons and electrons. The protons, which are the hydrogen cations, pass through a proton exchange membrane. The electrons, meanwhile, move from a negative electrode to a positive electrode via an external circuit. This external circuit is the loop of wire outside the fuel cell with a little light bulb next to it. The movement of these electrons generates a current and electricity. In the final chamber, the protons and the electrons combine with oxygen to form water molecules. The take-home point from this figure is that the input into a fuel cell is hydrogen atoms in the form of H2 and oxygen, and the output is water and electricity. These types of cells could produce electricity to power cars, homes, computers, and other devices for which we need energy. Hydrogen fuel cells are currently being used in some places, however we lack the infrastructure to implement this fuel on a large scale at this point. The benefits of hydrogen as a source of fuel are that it produces few greenhouse gases and pollutants, depending on the source of energy for electrolysis. If kept under pressure, hydrogen is as safe as gasoline in fuel tanks. Hydrogen fuel cells are energy efficient. Depending on the technology used, up to 90% of the energy released by the reaction can be used. They are silent and non-polluting. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, so as far as we know we will not run out of it, and hydrogen as an energy source can be clean and non-toxic. The costs of hydrogen as a source of fuel are that we currently lack the infrastructure in our established cities to fully utilize hydrogen as a fuel source, so we will need a great deal of investment in infrastructure to accommodate the switch to a hydrogen economy. We must build the facilities to transport, store, and provide the hydrogen fuel. Some research suggests that if hydrogen leaks from the areas we produce, store and transport it, this could deplete stratospheric ozone and lengthen the residence time of methane in the atmosphere. Finally, if hydrogen is not stored under pressure, it can catch fire and explode. While this sounds alarming, remember that gasoline can also catch fire and cause explosions if not stored, handled and used properly. That concludes the first mini lecture on new renewable energy alternatives. Please review the weekly outline and complete the activities for this week per the schedule set forth in the outline.